What is going on, guys? Welcome to a long overdue episode of the Masculine Health Solutions Podcast. We talk about everything related to men's health, improving ourselves. We talk everything from male enhancement to eating better and to, of course, improving the quality of our food and the intake, which is something we're going to talk about today from a perspective of someone who's living it, doing it day in and day out. I'm your host, CJ Rodriguez, fat loss coach. That's what I do. It's what I specialize in. And of course, if you want to put on some muscle, be sure to get at me. Fitness is what I love to do. And I'm blessed in that I can have tons of guests who talk about a vast array of different things that really just help us improve ourselves to become the best possible dudes that we can possibly be. And again, for a lot of you guys that have questions about PE or fat loss, or whatever the case may be sure to send me a DM on Instagram, because that's where I get noticed the most. I'm getting a whole bunch of random ones on WhatsApp, and sometimes I'm like, man, who's this? So just be sure to send it on Instagram, because that's where I'm going to be probably, that's usually where I answer the most, and with the social media that I check the most. But anyways, as I was talking about before, we do hear the word regenerative farming, right? And a lot of us don't really know what that word really means. And it's something that's becoming more popular because more and more of us want to know what's going on with our food. Most of us don't want Franken food. And most of us want to kick it old school and kind of go back to the way that we should be eating as human beings. And the beauty of today's guest, Sander Van Stee, is that he lives it day in and day out. Originally went to the University of Guelph because he wanted to study to be a veterinarian. Instead, he changed things around and got into regenerative agriculture, along with taking us down and taking us through the whole process today of how grass-fed beef actually looks like, along with pastured turkeys, and how the process of regenerative farming actually looks like, and what the difference between actually having nutritious food kind of looks like as well. And we didn't really touch on his journey so much because we actually got sidetracked in just talking about the ins and outs of the regenerative farming. And it's truly something remarkable because I am a huge believer that we should be eating food that's prepared in a way that makes sense, man. I kind of feel that a lot of the industrialized style that we're seeing now that has become popularized just out of necessity. And I understand, there's a lot of humans on this planet. However, I do always believe that there's a great way to go about doing things, right? And the beauty of it is that you can actually get in touch with him. If you live in the Ontario area, be perfect. Just be sure to check out moraleats.com. I have put all the links in the description, so be sure to check it out and be sure to get in touch with Sander. The man is a wealth of knowledge, and honestly, he was like, I would just felt honored to be able to pick his brain because I had a million questions. And as a father of two boys, I was asking because he's a father as well, man. He's a father as well. He's got 4 boys. He's got a wife. The man, we're in the same boat, man. We're just dudes out here that want to live the best possible lives for ourselves, for our kids, and obviously, give back to our community the best way possible. So that's the wonderful thing about Sander's approach is that when it comes to regenerative farming, he's trying to do it in a way that he can feed not only his children, but the people in his society in a way that's healthier, in a way that's better, in a way that can make his side of the world, his corner of the world, just a little bit better. So be sure to check him out. Be sure to give him a follow, give him some likes, man. Give him all the support he needs because I think we need more people like Sander out in the world, right? So I really hope you guys enjoy this episode, and just know that I'm going to have Sander on again because I want to hear more about his personal story. And again, we just got sidetracked with the beauty of what regenerative agriculture kind of looks like and what that process and how his day in and day out, to me, I just found it extremely captivating. And I hope that you guys enjoy this episode. So enough of my yapping. Let's jump on in. We've been long overdue, and that's one other thing that I was going to address before we do jump on in is just that the platform that I'm currently on is kind of transferring things over. So I will be switching over to Riverside in the near future. So be sure to check out my mug in the near future here as we transition to a combination of more video / audio as well. But I know most of you guys listen to audio anyway, so That being said, that's what's going on there. And be sure to check out Instagram for all the DMs, all the guys that send me different things or question me about supplements. And yes, I got a couple episodes lined up where we'll be talking about things like circumcision, which has been coming up a lot, and different people's approaches and how it might play into PE. I personally don't really think it does, but a lot of people have been asking me questions about that along with supplements and all of that. So don't worry, in the next couple of days, new episode just on that, just for you guys. But in today's episode, let's jump on in with Sander Van Stee. Let's talk about regenerative farming. Let's talk about some health and nutrition, baby. All right, enough of my yapping. Let's jump on into today's episode. Before we get started, one more thing. If you want to get any PE gear, be sure to check out TotalManShop.com. That is TotalManShop.com. And use the promo code MHS2020. Promo code is MHS2020 and get 12% off. Be sure to check out their wide variety of all kinds of good quality PE equipment. All right? And that's promo code MHS2020 for 12% off. And the website, once again, is TotalManShop.com. What is going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Masculine Health Solutions Podcast, where I am joined by Sander Van Stee, who's going to tell us a little bit about regenerative farming and agriculture and how this has really come into his life, how he figured this stuff out. And as a guy that's, interested in this, and it piqued my interest, and I was like, bro, this is a conversation I'm looking forward to having because it's something that gets thrown around a little bit, but I don't think a lot of people really understand it fully. So we are blessed in having Sander on the show today. First and foremost, Sander, man, how are you?
I'm doing excellent. I'm excited to be on your podcast.
Man, I'm excited to have this conversation with you and just learning more about what regenerative farming actually is and going in depth. Because like I said, and it's funny too, on your profile, it says that it's a buzzword that does get thrown around, but like many other buzzwords, a lot of people just kind of hear it, but don't really understand it. But my question to you is right off the hop is just like, what got you started down this road? Like what made you think about regenerative farming and, getting more, I guess, going in depth and actually, making it like bringing it to reality, man, like making this happen. I imagine can't be easy. So like what spurred you, I guess?
That's right. It's something that when I started farming, it really wasn't a thing at all. There was no talk of regenerative agriculture. There was grass-fed meat, but it wasn't nearly so popular as it is nowadays. But what got me going down that road was my own health concerns. So to rewind a little bit, in 2010, that's when I graduated from college and I came home to the farm. We farmed together with my dad for 4 or 5 years. And in 2015, we moved all of our dairy cows over to a new dairy facility. And in that barn, the cows did a lot better than in the old barn because the new barn was designed more for cow comfort and the cows thrived in that new barn. They did really, really well. And ironically, at the same time, that's when my own health started to slip. So the cows are doing better, and then I was doing worse. And then I was like, "What am I missing in life? Like, what's going on that my own health is now crashing?" And looking back, it almost seems a little obvious. I burnt out. I didn't prioritize my sleep. I didn't worry about my fitness or my health in any shape or form. I was really in the mindset of like, I'm young, I got to go hard, I got to get after it and chase my dreams and to hell with the consequences. And well, it turns out the consequences can be pretty tough, even if you're quite young. So at the age of 25, my testosterone crashed and it went down to single digits.
Damn.
And that started a whole journey of like reassessing my priorities. And I really started questioning the healthcare system because they weren't able to help me beyond just give me hormone replacement therapy. But beyond that, they couldn't really figure out what was going on. And it got to the point where they just told me I had to accept it. Is this something I need to deal with? It's something that doesn't have a real reason. It's just, it happens and I got to accept it and move on. And I wasn't really willing to do that. But so I was questioning the healthcare system. I was questioning my own health choices. And then along those same lines of thinking, I started questioning the way we farmed. And I have always been really passionate about animals. And I really want to give back to these animals that bring so much joy to my life. I want to figure out ways to make their life as good as possible. And I was really more so researching animal welfare and things that I could do to improve the quality of their lives, not necessarily regenerative agriculture at all, But that just kind of came along the same stream of thinking, whereas like get the cows out on pasture, get them out in the environment, and have the whole farm work as a holistic system. It sounded amazing, and there was a lot of perks for the animal as well. So that's what got me going down that road. So now I still have that commercial dairy farm. It's a relatively large farm, so it's pretty intimidating for me to figure out what am I going to do with all those dairy products and try to sell them all direct to consumer. So I'm starting on a smaller scale next to it with my pastured turkeys, which are falling in behind my grass-fed beef, which are moving every single day, and that movement is critical to regenerating the soil. It's needed to give that pasture rest, and it's in resting that pasture where the pasture recovers, the grass recovers, but also the whole root system. And that's where all the organic matter comes from that you are putting into the soil. And organic matter, that's carbon. Carbon comes from the atmosphere. So that you're storing greenhouse gases in the soil when you're managing the farm in this way. And it's something that it's very interesting, and there's a lot of details. So like at the surface level, what you're doing with regenerative agriculture is you're trying to maximize the soil health instead of necessarily just maximizing efficiencies.
Mhm.
But a level deeper than that is what you end up with is a whole ecosystem of microorganisms in the soil. It's not just dirt and nutrients and a whole, it's just a system where you pull nutrients from and you grow crops. It's a living, breathing system with a very complex food chain. And when you have that food chain, it's you have bacteria, you have fungus, you have worms, you have insects. It's a lot of things going on. And what the plant can do when you have that in the root system is the plant can put a sugar out in the soil, and they can trade those sugars for nutrients. It can ask for nutrients in the form of giving the microorganisms sugars, and the microorganisms grow from those sugars, and they mine the minerals from the soil and they give it to the plant. And it's great because basically anything the plant wants, it asks for on demand. There's no free floating nutrients in the soil that are sensitive to wash offs like what you have with fertilizers. And another consequence of applying fertilizers to the soil is that because you gave the nutrients to the plant, it no longer needs to ask the microorganisms for those nutrients.
Oh,
So then
what?
it loses the ability to even communicate with the microorganisms, which can be fine for the nutrients that you fertilize for, your nitrogen, your phosphorus, or your potassium, but you're not fertilizing for every single micronutrient that you could find in the soil, but the plant is still unable to get those. So you end up with food that's less nutrient dense.
Yeah, and I mean, because that's one of the biggest reasons my wife and I back in the day we started like look into industrial farming, and one of the things that we found, man, I can't remember. It was basically a dude who I believe was based out of Israel, and they asked this scientist like, okay, what is the purpose of the way that you design your crops and your food and your tomatoes? And he was showing a tomato, right? And he's like, oh, it's meant to last longer, right? And it's meant to be preserved for longer. And then he's like, let me show you some, and he threw it against the ground and didn't even get bruised. It just kind of like bounced back. And I'm like,
Yeah.
that's weird. And they asked him, okay, but what's the micronutrient content within that tomato? And he's like, I don't know. He's like, we're not really focused on that. We're focused on longevity of the food. And now what you're telling me, it's kind of like in this ecosystem, I imagine that the food's going to last the amount that it should, right? Because it's following like the natural, I guess, like the way it should be, like according to the laws of nature, I guess.
Yeah. Well, it's like with fruit and stuff like that. It's when you're farming this way, a lot of it is like you got to pick it when it's ripe, and then that's
Mhm.
when it's most delicious. It tastes good, but when it's ripe, that means a couple days later it's no longer ripe and it's starting to go bad already. Yes, like food this way definitely doesn't have the shelf life, and then also within like the same atmosphere of regenerative agriculture, you're also dealing with a lot of local farms. It's you're getting food from your local farmers that are um and food that's produced close to you that's meant for your longitude and your latitude, basically like your climate. And there's something to it as well for the health benefits of eating seasonally and eating food that's like growing in your area, so you're not confusing your body with a really high sugar content when it's the dead of winter, when your body thinking this is like you gotta conserve this time of year, and but your digestive system saying it's a time of plenty with all these sugars and stuff, like even if they are natural sugars, just having food that's locally produced and seasonal can have be like an extra added benefit to going down the same road.
Yeah, and I mean, I've always heard about seasonal eating, and it seemed like something that's easier to do. Like, because I'm Costa Rican, right? And obviously, I'm like, well, when I'm down there, it's like it's easy to eat because there's mangoes and all that just kind of growing off the trees. However, the one thing that I discovered, the older I kind of got, more wise here in Vancouver was just we have farmers markets. But for some
Yeah,
reason, it's almost like I think we have grown accustomed to just kind of going to the grocery store and getting avocados when it's like, as far as longitude and latitude, I don't really think avocados grow naturally around here, So
right.
I think
Yeah,
there's
and there's
something
something
100%
like
to it.
sunlight.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like the sunlight too, like it's I've read research where like the sunlight on your skin changes the microbiome in your gut. So you're
Yeah.
more able when you get lots of sunlight, like if you're home in Costa Rica, you get all that sunlight, your body changes so it actually digests sugars better. So
Hmm.
it actually is able to digest those fruits better.
Which is super. Because again, we go back to the fact that I do believe I'm a big believer in that you should eat seasonally and you should eat with like according to the food around you. I know that it's in the society that we live in, we want to eat what everybody else is eating. It's like, oh, I want that. It's like I live in Denmark, but I want to have mangoes, you know,
That's right.
and I understand that, but at the same time, that novelty comes with a price, right? And I think that that's what we don't realize and kind of gets, I guess, swept under the rug when it comes to our health. But another question that I had, which is probably a major difference, like what's one of the biggest differences that you can tell from your turkeys, let's say, that and the way they're grown versus like an industrial farm? Like what's one of the biggest differences that you can say, hey, you know what? I'm guessing taste is one, but along with like the micronutrient profile, like what are some of the biggest differences that you see?
Yeah, as far as like what you actually find in the meat, there's the turkeys, but also like the grass-fed beef, they've actually done biopsies on the muscles of the animals and they compare an animal that's raised on just grass versus an animal that's been finished on grain, and they take a biopsy of both and they actually look at the muscle of the animal. And in the animal that was raised on just grass, there is less evidence of aging. So
Oh,
I'm not aware of the same research done on pasture turkeys because it's not as large of a movement. There's not as much research on it, but on
interesting.
grass-fed beef, it's actually quite a bit. So like for aging, there's less oxidative stress and there's less glycation end products and there's less proteolysis, which is all like evidence of aging. And there's less of that in the grass-fed beef. And then when we go ahead and look at the nutrient profile, that translates, not surprisingly, into a healthier meat for us to eat. You have less antioxidants in your meat. Sorry, other way around. You have more antioxidants in your
Yeah.
meat. You have more vitamin A, more vitamin E, more omega-3 fatty acids. You have more phytonutrients, which are just nutrients that came originally from plants. And grass-fed meat is actually a really good source of phytonutrients. And and especially when they're raised in a regenerative way, the crazy thing is you're not only getting nutrients from the plant, you're getting nutrients from the fungus and the bacteria in the soil that the plant ate from. So it's making its way all the way up the food chain, and you're getting nutrients from all these microorganisms in the soil. Like
Yeah.
it really, yeah, it goes all the way, comes all the way back to the plate.
That's, I mean, it's insane when you think about it. Cause obviously, top of mind, I'm just thinking from the bare bones, just, well, I heard grass fed beef is better, but I don't really know why. But now, it's like, now that I got to explain to me, I'm like, that makes perfect sense. Cause you really, I mean, you're explaining the details, kind of like, the small things that get overlooked. And my other question in regards to that, now that you brought up the grass fed beef, and I mean, we all kind of know it's better, but you've explained why. My other question is now going back to the grain fed beef. What's in grain fed beef that's so detrimental to the cow itself? And what are just some of the ingredients that you see that you're just like, I don't want to feed my beef, this stuff?
Yeah, yeah. No, it's basically and it's not even for all that long in their life. Like all beef mostly is raised on grass when they're younger, just until they build up their frame. It's just the last several months where they're really trying to put on the fat. And they do that by
Oh, okay.
eating mostly corn and soy and like your oats and your wheat and stuff like that, but mostly corn and soy and all those oils and carbs. It's a really nutrient dense, like not nutrient, energy dense
I
food source.
gotcha.
The animal puts on weight really well. And it's like the grains and stuff themselves are not as good of a source of antioxidants either as lush green grass.
Yeah.
So it's a function of the nutrients that the animal is consuming itself, as far as having much less diversity in the diet and much less nutrients in its own diet and much more energy, which is almost an unnatural amount of energy that it wouldn't be able to find normally. But then a result is that it puts on fat so quick that for people that go to the grocery store and they're just picking the ground beef that's 10 cents cheaper than the one beside it, like, that's the one I'm going to pick because it's 10 cents cheaper. Well, what you're doing is that you're forcing the hand of the farmer to produce food as cheap as possible. And unfortunately, that means raise them in a way that gets them finished months earlier. Like it's a younger animal because they put on fat so fast.
Interesting. So you're saying that he hasn't even fully matured. He's just kind of good to go because he's so big and fat.
Exactly. And that's exactly it. And they actually don't want them to be too big. They don't want a massive frame on it. They don't want steaks that are too big. That's why, like, especially in Canada, Angus is a very popular breed. It's a smaller animal. But yeah, it's not even a mature animal. Like for example, veal is pretty popular right where I live. There's a thriving market for it. And don't get me wrong, veal is still a better option from a welfare perspective than when you compare to other parts of the world where the farmers can't even afford to raise the bull calves. They
Mhm.
basically have to live a life right at birth, which is a shame. But a veal is an improvement over that. But a veal calf, they live to be 8 months old. And and they're fed grain right from basically from a couple months old on. They're fed grain right, so they're already starting to finish, and they're fat by 8 months, and then they go. But like regular steers, regular grain-fed, grain-finished steers, they're finished. They have enough fat on their body at 15, 16 months old. And cattle really aren't their mature size until they're 24 months old, which is what the age you get when you're finishing them on grass. The grass is much less calorie dense,
Mhm.
so it takes longer to finish them. They grow more into their frame, and they really don't really put on fat until they stop getting taller. And then so they're quite 24, 25, 26 months old by the time you send them off to slaughter. And from my perspective, I think that's a massive plus for from a welfare perspective because this animal is living a longer life.
Yeah.
And this with grass fed, it's like they're spending that life on pasture instead of in a crowded feedlot. So I think it's a multiple levels. It's a big boost to the quality of life.
100%. I mean, to your point, it's kind of like because you had mentioned earlier too, you want to make it as comfortable and as good a life as possible for the animal before it gets to slaughter. My other question now, because immediately when you said that, I'm like, oh yeah. I mean, I remember seeing a couple of documentaries where they talk about how a lot of these animals just kind of stay almost corralled in one place. How detrimental would you say that is for the animal and for the product that we end up consuming? Would you say that it's like just pretty bad, like from having a stressed out animal the whole time, then eating it?
Yeah, that's right. That's actually something that I don't hear spoken about very often is the quality of life, the stress level of the animal, and how that reflects to the quality of the meat that you eat. And like I said, when they've taken these biopsies, they find different levels of antioxidants in the muscle.
Mhm.
And that then comes to like our plate when we finally get to eat it. So it's been well documented that the effects of chronic stress on our bodies and how that causes oxidative stress on our bodies and inflammation and basically exacerbates any disease conditions that you already have. All that stress is terrible on your body. So it's not a stretch. It doesn't take a big stretch of the imagination that all that inflammation and oxidative stress decreases the antioxidants in the final product.
Hmm.
So that's one big thing, but even in the final moments, it's critical that you treat these animals with respect and you keep in mind the animal's experience as it makes its way to the kill floor. Because in the last moments, you can have in a very highly stressed animal, they use up all their glycogen and they make their muscles acidic if they're stressed at the end, at the last moments, and you end up with a product called DFD or PSE, which is dark, firm, and dry meat, or pale, soft, and exudative. And the DFD is more common in beef. PSE is more common in pork, but you end up basically with meat that tastes terrible. It's either really dry or you take it out of the packet and it's just leaking juice everywhere, and that's just from a highly stressed animal. So like, it makes sense to from a financial perspective, it also makes sense to treat these animals with respect.
Yeah.
And it's not just black and white, you have it or you don't. It's on a spectrum. So the more relaxed you keep these animals at the very end, the better. And you do that with humane slaughter. And a lot of people would think that's an oxymoron, but in my opinion, it's very possible. So what that would look like is like you have to bring the animal to the slaughterhouse the day before so
Mhm.
that it can get used to the environment, it can get used to its pen mates. They have to form their social hierarchy, and then they can go to sleep and they can wake up the next day with a much lower level of stress. They're much more relaxed. They know where they are. They it's not just you're not just pushing them through the system. And then like you have to design the shoots and stuff in a way that the animal is not stopping and looking and staring and getting scared. Like you don't want a shirt hanging on the gate or a big beam of light crossing its path. The animal would be like, oh, what's this? And it's got to stop and look. And then the people handling these animals, they don't have patience for that. So then they
Mhm.
got to chase them forwards. And you want to avoid that. And the really well designed ones too are they have almost like circular corridors, so it almost always
Interesting.
feels like the animal's around corner. So that kind of keeps them moving forward as well. And then also the quality of the floor makes a massive difference. If you have great traction where the animal can walk and feel confident walking, that it's not going to slip, it also just not stress, it keeps walking. And then at the end of the shoot, it's a captive bolt, and then the animal has no idea what happened. It just is unconscious. And from that point on, the animal feels nothing. And then that's when, like, if you see videos of the whole process, it can look brutal, but you have to keep in mind that once it makes it to the end of the shoot, it's dropped and it's unconscious, and there's no pain, no stress from that point on. And if
Mhm.
you really think about it, like if I imagine myself in their shoes and being ignorant to this, to what's happening, it's really a stress-free way of going.
Yeah.
The only thing that can make it better, in my opinion, is that if you could skip the transportation, because an animal that's been out on pasture or even in a barn, the sensation of being on a trailer and being transported to a new location, of like being in a space that's your eyes are telling you these are my four walls, but your ears are telling you that you're moving. Like it's got to be a stressful situation. And even like getting loaded onto the trailer and stuff like that,
Mhm.
it's unavoidable that there's some level of stress associated with that. So like in a perfect world, you'd have like a mobile slaughterhouse that would come to your farm,
Right.
then the animal never have to leave what's familiar. That would be the perfect situation, which actually does there are businesses that do this in Europe, but unfortunately not there's
Interesting.
nothing available in Canada here that I could take advantage of. But
I mean, that'd be a great business venture if anybody has, has that figured
yeah,
out or the know-how to do that. But that's super interesting because I never thought of that process. And to your point, you're right. Because I mean, I've gotten it from the store before, where you go in there and it's kind of like a grayish, gunky meat, and you're just like, yeah, something's off with this one, right? Like it looks a little bit strange. And it's interesting too because it's kind of like I have watched like people try to convince me to go vegan, and I'm like, okay, cool. Like I'll watch the videos, and the way that I kind of saw like those slaughterhouses and the way that it was taken care of, it was very inhumane, and it was done in a very stressful way where I'm like, I didn't know that a cow could like feel that. I from a very ignorant standpoint, from the way that I was watching, I was like, oh man, like I'm pretty sure that meat ain't gonna taste good. And it was like halal type thing where they were like cutting the neck in front of like the other cows. I'm like, why would you
Yes.
do
Yeah,
that? Like, this is awful.
a different process. That's a different process altogether. That's right. Yeah. And I think halal, I don't know, I maybe shouldn't speak too much about it, but I feel like when halal became a thing in the past, it was a massive improvement over the like as far as sanitary and welfare, maybe over the what was common practice back then. And
Hmm.
then so I feel like maybe it was a step forwards in the past, but like now, through the work of someone called Temple Grandin, she really um push the industry forwards as far from a welfare perspective. She really focused on the slaughterhouse design, and she really looked at things from the perspective of the animal. So like well designed and well managed slaughterhouses, I think, have improved massively over the years. And of course, I'm sure if you there, not every single slaughterhouse is managed to the same degree. It's not
Hmm.
as well designed, or maybe even like they're not even a profitable slaughterhouse, so they're cutting corners and stuff like that. Or maybe like you have somebody that's just an angry human being that's managing the place, and you end
Yeah.
up with angry employees that don't have patience for these animals and don't respect them. It's just they've got to get through their shift. Like yeah, like I'm not surprised that you can find places that are mismanaged and treat their animals horribly. And it's like, I think that's when, as an industry, we need to shed light on that and not condone that kind of behavior and give them some sort of repercussions, or a fine or something,
Hmm.
or boycott it so that the rest of the industry can keep progressing without having these bad apples put a bad light on things.
Yeah. And you know what the thing is too though, and that's kind of why I'm like I always call like bullshit when people are all like, "Oh, it's all." I'm like, "No, man. People like to highlight the bad too." And that's why I commend you for your work, and that's why, I wanted to have this conversation because you're shedding light on like the proper way to do things. And I think too many people, I always see it all the time. You see the highlights of all the wrong things in any field, in any country. For some reason, like humans just gravitate to that, and they're like, "Oh, look at it." I'm like, it's not
Yeah.
usually like that. For the most part, it's always done in a correct way. There's always a processes that we got to follow. But for some reason, people like to highlight that. So,
Yeah.
I
There's
always,
going on there. Like it's like, yeah, negative human condition is like negative news travels
mhm,
better, makes for a better story than positive news. But on the other hand, like also like especially with social media now, you can
yeah,
really get an echo chamber. Whereas like you tell the algorithm this is the kind of content I want to see, and that's what it keeps feeding you. So then
100%.
all you see all day is animal abuse and how horrible agriculture is, and it's like, and then it makes sense that that's what you believe it is, because that's all you see, and all you get is you get constantly confirmation bias, and it's a dark place that you can go to.
100%. And that's it. It's kind of interesting because we have so much variety at our fingertips. And yet these algorithms will pick up on the fact that, oh, you like that? Cool. Let's create a silo and let's put you in there, And now you're
Exactly.
in that echo chamber, fighting battles by yourself that you think the whole world kind of lives in. And then when you step out and you have conversations like these, you realize you're like, wait a minute. Wait a minute. I don't wait. It's probably not like that. And that's kind of one of the beautiful things of having these conversations where and that's why I believe you named your company moraleats.com, because it's about doing it from a good moral place, right? And the beauty
Right.
of it is that when you learn more about something, it's kind of like, okay, well, that ignorance isn't there anymore, therefore I got to draw different conclusions up, right? Which I think is
Yeah.
something that's missing, from a lot of humans just in general, because it's kind of like somebody hears something, they just kind of roll with it, and then again you get stuck in that echo chamber. But when you learn more about something, and I think that's one of the things that we have to do, is just be willing and open to learn more about how to improve our lives and about what everybody else does too, because I think that's the thing, is that too many people just assume that their assumptions are right and draw conclusions based off of opinions, and I'm like, bro, that's bullshit. The more people I talk to, the more I'm like, the more I'm able to learn about how there's specific ways that people do things. And the reason why they do those things in that way is because they found it is the best way to do them for the most part, if you're looking to improve whatever it is that you're doing. So, I find this to be very, very informative. And I think if people roll with it, it's kind of like, hey, you're like, wait a minute, okay, my perspective can change.
That's right. And I even try to take it one step further. You say about being open-minded, and I'm open-minded to a fault, but I try to take it even a step further where you actually try to seek out disconfirming evidence and really look at both
Yes.
sides of the story. Like
Hmm.
it's a journey that I've been down, like, because like with my own health issues, is like, what is the best diet for people to eat? You'd think that
Hmm.
would be something pretty obvious. And then you go out into the internet and you look at all the smart people, the researchers, the scientists, the doctors, and there are so many different diets that they recommend, and
Hmm.
they're all smart people. They all have lots of research backing up their points, and it's like it all makes sense as long as if you give them a chance and you hear out their perspective, it all makes sense.
Yeah.
So especially with diet, I find the best thing you can do is like don't be dogmatic about it. Don't treat your diet like a religion, and just try
Hmm.
it. See how you feel, because like that's a really good way to judge a diet, because like if you feel like you have lots of vitality, lots of energy, lots of strength, well, in my eyes, that's kind of what it feels like to be young. And if you want to hold on to that as long as possible, I think that's what it would be like from a diet perspective, to eat for longevity, because you want that vitality for as long as possible.
I think so, and I 100% agree with you because, I mean, to your point, it's like for me, I've always been to like the health and fitness kind of space, right? And you're like, which one's going to help me burn fat, help my performance and all that. And I remember that movie came out, Game Changers, and I'm like, I'll give veganism a try. And I never felt worse. I felt like complete shit. And I was like, I am
Exactly.
not doing this again. I just did not, I just didn't feel good. And I'm like, it's not for me. And if somebody can do it and supplement properly, and that's kind of where I drew my own conclusions based off of my own experiences too. I'm not just going to take somebody's word for it. I'll actually go and experience it. And obviously, the more research I did, the more I found out that I'm like, hey, you know what? Red meat, grass fed, is probably one of the best options out there due to its micronutrient profile. And there's a lot of research to back that up. But I remember, when I was reading in your profile as well, like you experienced different diets as well, right?
No, that's right. Yeah, like back when I first got sick, 2015, 2016, that's when like the vegan movement was really hitting its stride. And like if you look on the internet, there really wasn't much else out there as far
Hmm.
as like you gotta eat those plants, you gotta eat your vegetables, eat all the vegetables you can, the more the better kind of thing. So like he was like, well, like I'll give it a try. I'm a dairy farmer of all things, and
Yeah.
I'm not consuming dairy, I'm not eating meat. I'll give it a try. Like if it's gonna make my hormones come back, it's worth it, right? And what I found is like the longer I stuck on it, I just kept getting more and more food sensitivities. And it's
Yeah.
and I was doing it right. Like I was eating all whole foods. I was eating the beans. I was trying to get the calories up, eating like smoothies and nuts and seeds with every meal. So I still got some fats in there, like all the superfoods. And I was even like spice and stuff like that. Like, oh, you gotta have your curcumin and your turmeric and your with pepper and stuff like that. Like I was trying all of it. Like I went down that rabbit hole pretty far, but yeah, like yourself, it didn't really end up serving me. And like so like I've tried that, and then like now more recently there's like the carnivore community, and I was like, really, how can the nutritional advice be so wrong that there are people eating nothing but meat and
Hmm.
thriving? And I was like, if these people can eat nothing but meat, I'm sure I could eat more meat, and I'll be
Yeah.
fine. Right. And I was like, and then you start hearing those people, I'm like, okay, yeah, there's science behind that too. That can make logical sense if you
Hmm.
look at it from their perspective, if you listen to them with an open mind. And then so like, okay, I'll eat more meat. And then I was like, I feel better. I eat more meat and I feel even better. I was like, yikes, like I eat a significant amount of meat now, and that's really the best that I feel. And it's like it's kind of like a different focus. It's like you got not just the nutrients that's in the food, it's also the nutrients that you can absorb and digest. And it's in a form that your body can use, that your body doesn't need to switch from a plant version to an animal version of that vitamin, like for like keratin, for example, to vitamin A. Like you don't need it. Some people can't make that switch. They can't change it over, and that's a significant amount of the population. That's just one vitamin. Like there's so many examples, and so like if instead of focusing on the nutrients that's in the food that you're eating compared to the amount of calories in that food, which is what the um I've heard a lot spoken about, is like instead just focus on like a food that's still nutrient dense, but easily digestible, and it's done wonders for me.
Yeah. And I mean, the proof is in the pudding, I think, because there's an old book that I always go back to by Weston A. Price where he was talking about all the different people around the world and they all ate in the same way that you had mentioned earlier. It was according to longitude and latitude. They were eating what was around them, to put it
Exactly.
simply. And if you go back, 100 years back, it's like, well, what was around you? Some type of protein, be it bison, be it wild boar, be it pig, be it whatever the case may be. A lot of seafood if you're on the coast, and if you're inland, it's kind of like, and he brought up like the Swiss and how they consumed a lot of dairy products, and they were completely fine with it versus somebody that was, maybe out in like the bush of like the Amazons. It's you got to go by what's around you, and your body will process it better, right? And again, I'm in the same boat as you, where it's kind of like I would explore these different ideas and these different diets that existed, but at the same time you got to see what has worked for many years. It's like I don't understand why we got to try to rewrite the wheel with a whole bunch of supplements and something new flashy. Like, I've come to that conclusion now, like as a fitness coach and helping people get into shape. I'm like, we don't need all the supplements. You don't need all that stuff that they market to you. It's kind of like, let's look at the meat, potatoes, and the vegetables, right? Like, and then you just kind of consume the amount of calories that you're consuming from that, and you kind of just make sure that it's within reason. And if you do go up, it's like a little bit more protein, whatever the case may be. But whole foods are always better. And there's nothing better, in my opinion, than grass fed beef. Like, there's tons of studies now that are coming out. And that's why carnivore is taking off the way it has. You got people like Jordan Peterson, Dr. Sean Baker. Rogan's had a lot of people talk about it on his podcast. And I think there's a reason why it stands, the tests of time. Like, it's always going to be there, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's a perspective that has been has not had enough focus in the past because I think the popularity of the whole vegan diet and also the standard recommendations towards like the eating lots of fruit and vegetables as much as possible and minimizing saturated fat and
Mm-hmm.
minimizing cholesterol for your heart health. And it's like is I think the carnivore community is really taken off just because
Mm-hmm.
it's a voice that hasn't been heard for such a long time. And like what I really personally love about that community is that they are not dogmatic. Like they are
No, they're
carnivore
open.
drinking
Yeah.
coffee. There's ones that are eating fruit and honey. There's ones that and even when the ones that are more extreme, they're eating nothing but red meat, nothing but ruminants, like the Petersons, Michaela
Mm-hmm.
and Jordan Peterson. Like they still say like, I eat this way because I have to. Uh,
Yeah.
and if you don't have to, you just do what works for you. Like I love that the whole community is just much more accepting and they're not dogmatic about it. They're all about like what works. And
Yeah.
that's great. But it's like it's interesting too about like like having that balanced diet and like what people are supposed to eat. Because if you go back several hundred years, most of the fruit and vegetables that we're eating today didn't exist.
Yep.
If you look at like the like what they all came from, like that's what a banana looked like originally, or like the broccoli and stuff like that. This is not very tasty food, and even the root vegetables, arguably we've been eating for a very long time too. It's like the toxin load on those root vegetables were much higher in the past because
Mhm.
like those it's storing the plant is storing nutrients for the winter. Like it's not storing that for you to eat. Like it's not like is the case for fruit and stuff like that. Like, and like we've changed those with breeding. We've lowered the toxin levels. We've made it so we can handle it better. That we've increased the calorie content, the more carbs and that are in it, less fiber, and we've made it taste better, look prettier, and all that stuff. But if you really look at like what humans ate, I think it's pretty telling when you see the wave of animal extinctions as human population expanded across the globe. It's like it's always the biggest, the fattiest mega herbivores that are going extinct. That are the humans, like, and maybe it's still up for debate. It might not be the only contributing factor to their extinction, but humans were hunting these animals preferentially, like these big, massive mammoths and stuff like that,
Mhm.
with lots of fat on them, or like the giant sloths and stuff like that,
Mm.
that that aren't around anymore. Like if you look in the wild today, it's a lot of lean meats, a lot of deer and stuff like that. But those are a lot of like the smaller animals, like the really massive ones. They used to carry a lot more fat, and that's definitely what humans preferred in the past.
Well, yeah, it was all about feeding the tribe. There was no other way around it. And it's funny because you did mention the bananas, and it's crazy because like when I was in Costa Rica, I remember the first time I saw an orange, like a legit orange off a tree. it didn't look like the nice, beautiful oranges I see here, man. Like at the grocery store, this thing was all green and kind of like brownish. And I'm like, that's an orange. I'm like, it doesn't look like an orange. Look at this beautiful sun-kissed orange, but it's like God only knows what kind of like dyes and what else they put on it, and kind of like polishing the apples as well. And to your point, I mean, it makes perfect sense now that you mentioned it, because I'm like, you're right. It's like as far as really big fat animals, they're not really around all that much. It's
Well, that's
almost
why
like
we're raising them. That's why we're
ex-
raising our grass finished beef, because we still want it. All the pork
yeah.
and stuff. People love that fatty pork. It tastes amazing.
Oh,
Well, now there's some mixed feelings because people are like, oh, you gotta stop eating that fat. It's bad for you. But so there's this narrative for the last, I don't even know how many years, 50 years, something like that. So you gotta
yeah.
eat less of that saturated fat, but naturally we want it. It tastes amazing combined with that meat. Like there's a lot of flavor in there and it's great to cook with. And so like because we want it, that's why there's also like the very popular animals to raise for agriculture is because we still have that desire for it. Like I think if you really listen to your body, especially pregnant women can be great for this, right? Like if you
Mhm.
really listen to your body, you want that fatty meat.
Yeah. And what the thing is, that satiation factor, if it's something inherent inside of you as a human being, it's like, why fight against it? It's like you're going away against like what you're programmed to eat, these super processed superfoods that they call them. I'm like, I don't think so. I think, simple is best. Plus, the thing is, your body knows what's coming in and it's able to process everything from a way that, like, it says, okay, cool. I got all my minerals, my vitamins, fat soluble vitamins. All right, perfect. It's all there. Bam, with the branch chain amino acids. I'm able to take everything that I need. But before,
Yeah.
because we're coming up already, I'm like, man, this is going too fast. But if you could just take us through the process of what regenerative farming really looks like for you on a day-to-day basis, because I'm curious to what like the actual process of it is. Like, like if you could take us through like a typical day for Sander, man.
Absolutely. Like there's principles that you follow for regenerative agriculture. And those are like you want to maximize the biodiversity in your soil and around your soil. You want to minimize the disturbance of the soil because especially the fungal life is so sensitive. As soon as you disturb it anyway, compaction with your big equipment, all that fungus life just dies off. And then you also
Interesting.
want to have living roots into the soil all year round. Even when they're like semi-dormant in the winter, you need to have the relationship between the plant and the microorganisms, or else those microorganisms will just die off. So you need that, and you also need armor on the soil, or else you have the sunlight beating on your soil, it'll dry it up, crack it, and that drought-ridden soil, like that doesn't sustain life either. You need moisture. All life needs water. And the last thing is your animal impact. So like those are the main five principles of maximizing your soil health. And the beauty thing is like when you are rotationally grazing animals, like what we're doing with our turkeys and our beef, like when you do that, you naturally follow all of these principles. Like it just kind of happens. You don't really need to think about it too much. But these principles, like the fact that we can know them is useful because then we can apply that to row cropping, to fruit production, vegetable production, and you can grow anything with these principles and improve the soil health. It just takes a little more intention. And like I'm in a stage on our farm where I'm just doing an awful lot of experimentation. One for trying to find ways to improve animal welfare, but now also like this regenerative agriculture. Like I got like these compost bins that I'm growing, and you can make teas from this really high quality compost that is teeming with biodiversity, teeming with fungus, especially because that's what you're trying to add to the soil. Because even dead soil has bacteria, but it doesn't have the fungus and the worms and the insects and stuff like that. The whole food chain, you're adding the food chain back to the soil to bring it to life, to fast forward the whole thing. Because even things like I can plant diversity and then over time, over years of having this diverse pasture, the microorganisms will come. But there's like things that I'm experimenting with, like making this compost tea that I can apply to the field just to kickstart the whole system and make it happen quicker, where you have this ecosystem of microorganisms in the soil.
Mhm.
Well, like yeah, like the with the turkeys and with the beef, it just is so much easier. It
Yeah.
doesn't nearly the same amount of intention to improve that soil health. All you do is like you give them enough grass for the day, you move them on to the next piece, and then 3 days later, it's the turkeys are following in behind the animals. Like there's insects that are attracted to the manure from the bulls. And like, so then turkeys come by and they're eating those insects and they're spreading the manure out. They're spreading out those nutrients from the bulls. And the turkeys, they're a lot smaller, so they don't like this tall grass. They can hardly see each other. So the bulls, they shorter, they trample it down. And then turkeys, they come a little bit later on into the shorter grass and like they complement
What?
each other really well. And it's like it makes sense because if you really look at it, like what the birds would do with the ancient herds of bison that used to go across North America, it's something very similar to that what we have set up with the turkeys. Like
What?
this, and it's great because like the push for efficiencies also pushes us towards specialization.
Mhm.
And regenerative agriculture has a very different push. It really wants you to treat your whole farm like an ecosystem. Don't separate your animals from the crops and stuff like that. And even if you are growing vegetables or fruit, put some animals in there. Like you have it all mixed in, and it's a very different looking way of farming.
Yeah. I mean, the part that sticks out to me the most is like you said, it's kind of like the bulls come and then the turkeys are behind there. It almost seems like there's like a natural order to the way things should be done. It's almost like I wouldn't say it's an artificial setting because it's still in nature, but it's almost like you're pushing them to go and it's like, all right, this is your position. It's your turn now. Act two, turkeys. you know.
Exactly. Yeah, and like yeah, and you're really just trying to get out of nature's way and like really learn from nature and just manage it in a way that keeps those ideal conditions continuing because like I know like if I give the bulls if I like allow if I allow them to do what they want and like when it's like a rainstorm or something like that they'll clump and try to protect each other from the rain and then they'll see some mud and they'll trample in that mud and if it's a hot day the next day well they'll still go and hang out in that mud and before you know it that little patch there is absolutely destroyed. It's not going to grow anything for the rest of the year. So like
Oh,
you see what works on the good days and then like on rainy days you just keep moving them so you don't get that that buildup of mud and the trampling because like the moisture in the soil also makes the soil softer so it's more sensitive to damage from these animals. So like you can actually learn from nature but then also try to manage it in a way that you keep these ideal conditions growing. So like when
yeah.
it's dry you can slow them down a bit because now the soil can handle a little more weight. It can handle the weight of the animals a little better without getting destroyed. But then when it's really raining, it's really wet. And in Ontario, BC too, like you get a lot of rain. So you
Yeah.
got to keep moving or else you're going to ruin your pasture.
That's interesting because I never even thought about that. But the other question I had immediately when you said rain, because it's Canada, I was thinking, like, how do you guys deal with snow then?
That's right. Yeah, there's different two different ways that you can do it, and it depends on how much rain and snow you get. And like, because like cattle, they can handle cold condition. They're designed for. It. They have that layer of insulation, so they can handle cold quite well as long as it's not windy and drafty.
Uh-huh.
So what you see a lot with in the regenerative space is that in the winter they'll just put out, or I guess more in the fall, they'll put out bales in the field, and
Mhm.
then when there's not much food left on pasture, they'll just allow these animals
Oh.
access to these bales that they put there in the fall, and it's still like you're still rotationally moving them from one bale to the next bale to the next bale, but that only works if your ground is frozen solid. As soon as you have thaw cycles throughout the winter or rainy cycles or anything like that, your ground softens up. It's very moist. You have all that sloppiness from the snow and stuff like that. And the snow actually insulates the ground as well. So if you have lots of snowfall, you have more insulation, and then you have softer soils then too. So like, unfortunately, in Ontario, and it would be the same in BC, if you tried some bale grazing, you almost need to sacrifice a piece of land because they're going to destroy it because it's going to be so soft because we have too many thaw cycles in here in Ontario. Like
Mhm.
in the middle of the country, Alberta, Saskatchewan, or even going to the US, it gets colder there, but it's dry cold,
Yeah.
and you don't get the same amount of snow. You don't have nearly as much insulation to keep that soil warm. So it gets really hard, that dirt. So you that's like bale grazing is very popular in the prairies.
Yeah.
But what we actually do, we have an old barn, so we just put them in the barn for the winter. We give them a straw bale once a week that they can destroy and knock around a little bit and keeps them dry. And then we bring them fermented grass, fermented hay, and then that's what they eat throughout the winter. And then as soon as the we have enough grass growing in the spring, you have that root system. That root system brings structure to the soil, strength, and then it can handle the weight of these steers again. And you put them back outside.
That's super interesting, man. Because it's like I said, you don't know what you don't know, right? And
That's
I'm like,
right.
honestly, there's like a method to the madness, man. Because it seems I always saw those bales. I'm like, I wonder why they're out there. Because I mean, I used to drive out in Saskatchewan and all that. And when I was working out there, I'm just like, I always wondered. I'm like, what's the deal with all the bales out there? Especially when it's like, -20 or whatever the case may be. And I imagine there had to be some type of protocol for it. But now that you explain that, man, that makes perfect sense, dude. But tell us a little bit more about your website and where anybody can find you.
Yeah, so our website is moraleats.com. Moral eats. So it's just like that. So then and we have a promotion basically. If you sign up to our email list and you sign up to our newsletter, we'll give you the chance to win a free meat box that's at least $230 value, and you
Damn.
can try. So you can have the potential to try some of our meat for free. And then we also have a lot of information on there, a little bit about my backstory and some other reading material and stuff like that from our website. But then we also post stuff on social media, like we're on YouTube and TikTok. I'm Sander Van Stee. That's my handle. But then also for Instagram, we're Moral Eats, and on Facebook, we're Moral Eats Farms. So
Nice.
that's the best way to get in contact with us. As and then obviously I'll be referring to people to your podcast as well, so they can listen to our long conversation. I love the format of these long form conversations. It allows you to go much more in
Yeah.
depth. Whereas like a lot of content that I make is like under a minute videos. So it's just you gotta like hook them and then get those views up there and like keep it really short and sweet. And you don't get the same backstory that you can in
Mhm.
these long form conversations.
100%. Because the thing is, it's kind of like with those TikTok shorts and that. I mean, if you're really good, you could probably get as much cramming as much information to like a minute. But that's kind of why I love, the podcasting side of things. And honestly, it was a blessing to have you on the show, like I said before, because this is something that I think is gonna change, has to change in the near future. Because I think more and more people are becoming aware of the fact that there's a big difference between grass-fed beef and the industrial stuff that's loaded with steroids and hormones and God only knows what else, right? Along with the proper
Right.
protocols that you employ to make sure that everything that comes through your farm is done in a moral way, right? And I honestly I value that, and I think it's something fantastic, man. And the fact that you were able to hear it just enlighten me. I'm like, I gotta go tell my wife about all the things I learned today, and about the
Right.
differences, and then hopefully we can see major changes, man. But honestly, Sander, this was very, very enlightening. And anybody that wants to get in touch with you, I'll make sure all the links are in the description. And again, thank you for coming on the show, bro.
It's been a pleasure. It's been nice talking to you.
And with that, guys, until the next episode.